we're actually developed in Hong Kong, as I'll talk about. My topic is actually, should overseas game startups who are targeting a US and a global audience, should they have some sort of presence or relocate to the US? Particularly interesting to me because I'm grappling with exactly this sort of topic at the moment. But also I'll kind of swing it in reverse. I guess many of you are probably based here, and I'll talk about the other way around as well. Like, is it interesting for US companies to have some sort of overseas presence when they're small? Of course, if you're an Ubisoft, you have huge teams in China and so forth. But what about when you're a small one-person, two-person, five-person startup? So let me get started. Just about us. So we make a line of 3D mobile games for women, predominantly based towards the US. So the Miguel series, our first game, Style Miguel, was launched about 2 months ago. So we're very much targeting the US audience, and then looking at global once we get the foothold in the US. Most downloads, we've got over a couple million downloads in the US, which is the majority of our downloads. But we are 100% based in, developed in Hong Kong. So all of our engineers and all of our designers are in Hong Kong up to now. So that's a little bit of the context in the background. So let's get into it. I tried to break down what's important for success for a game studio. And I kind of broke it up into 8 different parts. And now this is a super simplified view, but I think I want to kind of run through the different parts and see how much benefit there is to actually having a direct presence in the US for them. So on the left-hand side is the ones that I think are a really big benefit for having a US presence for an overseas company. The first one, of course, is funding. So you may be able to bootstrap it, get it off the ground yourself organically, but if you need some external funding to get it off the ground, you're going to have a lot more options in the US. So a friend of mine, a startup who hasn't launched a game yet, is right now in the process of closing a $500,000 seed round of funding with no game, hasn't done games before. That level of kind of like risk, comfort with risk, I think doesn't really exist to that extent outside of the US. So if you're talking, and by the way, when I say US, I kind of mean the Bay Area. So funding is definitely a lot easier in the US. And now there's more competition as well. There's more great companies looking for funding. But certainly the risk threshold is much lower in the US. Now, it's not to say you can't raise elsewhere. I mean, we raised our last seed round in Asia, close to home in Hong Kong and Singapore, in China, but a lot easier in the US. Monetization and marketing, let's say if you're targeting towards a mobile game. Monetization and marketing, I think there's significant benefits from being in the US. Why? It may seem a bit strange because, hang on, it's a network. You can just plug into the network wherever you are in the world, and it's self-serve in a way. And that's true for a vanilla sort of deal. But if you're looking for some of these players on the monetization and marketing side, there's a significant benefit to actually having a real face-to-face relationship. Being able to go and talk through issues, work on deal terms, getting a special kind of like program together, definitely worthwhile to actually be there in person. It's something you can't really do over the phone or over emails to the same extent. I'll give you one example. A friend of mine actually just launched her first game. She's a startup, 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 developers. And she got a very good deal with W3I. So basically helped to fund the first development and do a whole lot of marketing and really cut away all of her upfront kind of like investment requirement. And so now she's going for investment, and she's already got a first game out the door and a track record with that. So you can do a lot actually being based in the US, just developing those relationships. Same for PR. So getting to know the press, getting to know the bloggers, it helps. I mean, if you're just kind of cold emailing people from literally the other side of the world, it's hard to kind of break through the clutter. These people get thousands of emails every single week. And yet you can actually meet them in person at these sort of events, which is very helpful. So I think those are very strong advantages or things that are important to have some presence in the US. On the right-hand side of things, where it's perhaps less so. Development, I think that you can get developers for less cost and kind of like build a team much cheaper in some other countries. To give you a rough idea, in Hong Kong, to get a really great experienced engineer would be about maybe between 30 to 40,000 US a year, compared to maybe triple or more of that to get that sort of person in the Bay Area. So there's cost reasons and advantages to do it elsewhere. And then there's three which I think there's some benefit, but it's not such a huge one. So live ops, ongoing optimization analytics. Game design you can do remotely if you have someone who's kind of in tune with it, although it's good to be close to your target players. And if you want to have like publisher relationship, it kind of helps to be in the US. But it's not a must-have. And this is just one example. I had no idea what beer pong was until like last Friday. And my friends at Tapjoy kind of said, "Oh, you don't know what beer pong is? Come and play." And half an hour later, and feeling very groggy. I don't know if you remember the GTA 4 kind of like drunken scenes. That's kind of how I felt after that. But you can't do that over email. Skype calls. Well, I hope you can.
Virtual game.
That's right. So this sort of thing is kind of like helpful, and if you want to get a good relationship and a good working partnership, it's good to be kind of like interacting in person with these people. And I think also what I'm learning is that there's really a big difference actually talking to users in person. I've done a lot of like remote usability tests and focus groups and Skype calls with players, but actually sitting down with your target market and hearing them, hearing what they do, what's on in their lives, what their interests are, what frustrates them day to day. That stuff is all the kind of like cultural context, which is really important to getting something that really hits with them and really resonates with them. And this is from last week. We're doing some focus group testing on our new game, which is coming out in a couple months' time. So it's really helpful to actually be close to your users. And as I mentioned, we keep development in Asia. So this is the team in the Hong Kong office. Just a quick kind of summary of tips. So if you are a overseas developer looking to have some presence in the US, plenty of accelerator and incubator ones. We went through Yedizen, which was a great experience. But there's lots of others, non-game specific, like 500 Startups and Y Combinator, and other game ones like Game Dojos. Networking, conferences, meetup.com has a whole bunch of events. There's an email list which has lots of events every week. Co-working spaces, a great place to go and work side by side with other game companies. So we were hanging out in Parisoma for a while in San Francisco, right next to Papaya and right next to two other game companies, and you get to learn from them and share notes. It's helpful. There's plenty of others. Living space, you can actually live in a place where there's like co-working, co-living, or co-live with other startups, including some game guys. So there's like startup dorms. And then all the other stuff, I can give you kind of like references if anyone's interested, or how to do some of the other logistical parts. So it's a really good way. In 2 or 3 months, if you can get a visa for 2 or 3 months, it's a great way to kind of immerse yourself and build up knowledge and contacts. And some of the risks involved. Visas really vary, and it's a whole nother talk. Luckily I'm Australian, so it's a lot easier. My options are a little bit more, but it's harder for other countries. Team collaboration can be really hard. This is a difficult one. Time zones, remote tools, not being able to whiteboard as easily as freeform. So we use a lot of like online flowchart tools. Google Docs is kind of our lifeblood. Social love, family life, prepare for sacrifices. It can get very tough. And also can get expensive. You have to find cheap accommodation and of course the airfares and so forth. So you have to manage that, and so I kind of stay in a $40 a night place and try to keep my costs relatively low whenever I come into the US. And a final note in reverse, which is US startups. So it can work in reverse too. If you're kind of like starting up and you can't get funding or can't get a publisher that can help offset some of those costs, but you need to and you can't do it yourself, a great way is to actually go and just up and go out to a cheap country and maybe work with a contractor for 2 or 3 months and kind of crunch an initial product together. So in Asia you could go to many places. You could go to basically travel around from country to country and basically live that way and do it at low cost and make a lot of progress. And you can always relocate back to the US when you're ready. Last week I was catching up with some friends from Six Waves and talking to the founder, and that's exactly what he did. He was based in the US, he had the idea, he was working at Water Cooler, which became Kaban, had the idea, went back to Hong Kong, grabbed his buddies from Hong Kong, crunched on it together, made some really good progress, and then now he's back in the US, and that's his corporate presence. And of course, they're a very big company now, gone through their trials and tribulations, but I mean, that's how they got their start as well. So that's basically it, and my contact info. Any questions? We've got a couple minutes for any questions if you've got any.
I'm curious, do you have any examples of where it didn't work out too well? Where they had the best intentions to basically do this, but it just, for whatever reason?
Yeah, I've got a couple of friends who've had that situation where they've kind of like moved to a country and with the intention of kind of getting something started, but they haven't done their cultural background or done their research in advance. So they just turn up and say, oh, where are good developers? Well, it's hard to find good developers no matter which country you're in. They don't grow on trees, just drop on the ground to pick up like apples. So that's one case. You really have to do your homework no matter where you decide to go beforehand. And I think in the reverse, I have seen friends who come to the US and just said, okay, I'm coming for 1 month and I'm going to get funded, and it just doesn't work that way. I mean, you really have to set your roots and have done all your groundwork. And the friend I mentioned who had got funding without a game, I mean, he's done an incredible amount of networking over the last 4 or 5 months and really built up his connections and built the vision and the story and refined the pitch for a long time. So you can't just take a few-week trip and expect you're going to get results. But if you lock yourself for like 3 or 4 months, I think you can make a lot of progress. Any other questions?
You've got a unique perspective on the global opportunity for games.
Yep.
And you've obviously identified North America as a target market, but you also are looking at how to build a company that can exploit other opportunities.
Right.
Is it good to get that perspective for what Asia's appetite is and the rest of it?
Absolutely. It's definitely good to be, that's another advantage, I guess, for basing yourself somewhere else or having kind of spending most part of your time in another country to get that view. The tough part about Asia is that it's so